The fluorescent lights in the chemistry lab always gave him a headache. Daniel sat at his usual spot in the back corner, watching his teacher hand back last week's exam. He already knew what was coming. The way Mr. Thompson paused at his desk, the slight shake of his head, the paper placed face down. Daniel didn't even need to flip it over to know he'd failed again. 47%. The red number seemed to mock him from the top of the page. It was actually better than last time, if you could call it that. But a failing grade was still a failing grade, no matter how you looked at it. Daniel folded the paper quickly and shoved it into his backpack before anyone could see. Not that it mattered much anymore. Everyone in school knew he was the kid who couldn't pass a test to save his life. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. When his family moved here 3 years ago, his parents had such big dreams. They'd left everything behind in their home country, worked double shifts at jobs they were overqualified for, all because they believed in the promise of a better future. A future where their son could become someone important, a doctor maybe, or an engineer, something that would make all their sacrifices worth it. Instead, they got Daniel, the boy who studied for hours and still failed, the one who could read the same paragraph 5 times and still not remember what it said, the kid who mixed up formulas, forgot dates, and blanked out during every single exam like his brain had been wiped clean. It wasn't that he didn't try. God knows he tried. While other kids were out on weekends, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at textbooks until the words blurred together. His mom would bring him tea and snacks, hovering in the doorway with this worried look on her face. She never said anything, but he could feel her disappointment hanging in the air like smoke. His dad was worse. He'd ask about grades at dinner, his voice carefully neutral like he was bracing himself for bad news. When Daniel mumbled his responses, his father would just nod slowly and go back to eating. The silence hurt more than yelling ever could. The bell rang, snapping Daniel out of his thoughts. Students rushed past him, chattering about weekend plans and some party happening on Friday. Daniel packed up his stuff slowly, waiting for the crowd to thin out. He'd learned that trick early on. Disappearing into the crowd meant less chance of someone asking about his grades or making jokes about the dumbest kid in class. "Daniel, can you stay back for a minute?" Mr. Thompson's voice cut through the noise. His stomach dropped. Here it comes, he thought, the talk. The one where teachers tried to be understanding while basically telling you that you weren't cut out for their class. He'd had this conversation before with his English teacher, his history teacher, and his math teacher. Might as well add chemistry to the list. He walked up to the front desk, gripping his backpack straps like a lifeline. Mr. Thompson was shuffling papers, not making eye contact. That was never a good sign. "Look, I know you're trying," the teacher started, and Daniel had to stop himself from laughing. That's how they all started. "But I'm concerned about your performance. We're halfway through the semester, and you haven't passed a single exam. At this rate, you're going to fail the class." Daniel nodded. What else could he do, argue? Explain that he actually did study, that he spent hours trying to understand the material, that it just never seemed to stick. He'd tried that before. Teachers always looked at him with this mix of pity and doubt, like they thought he was making excuses. "I'm going to recommend you for tutoring," Mr. Thompson continued. "And maybe we should set up a meeting with your parents and the school counselor. There might be some underlying issues we need to address." Underlying issues. That was code for "we think something's wrong with you." Daniel had heard whispers about learning disabilities, about maybe needing to be in different classes. The thought made him feel sick, like failing regular classes wasn't embarrassing enough. "Okay," he said quietly. "Can I go now?" Mr. Thompson sighed and waved him off. Daniel practically ran out of the classroom, his face burning. The hallway was mostly empty now, just a few stragglers heading to their next class. He ducked into the bathroom and locked himself in a stall, trying to breathe normally. This was his life now, failing, disappointing people, feeling like he was stuck in quicksand while everyone else moved forward. His parents didn't understand. His teachers didn't understand. Sometimes he wondered if he was just stupid, if all the studying in the world couldn't fix whatever was broken in his brain. The warning bell rang. He was going to be late for English, another class where he was failing, another hour of pretending he understood what was going on. Daniel splashed water on his face and headed out. Lunch was worse. He sat alone at a corner table, picking at the sandwich his mom had packed. Around him, groups of friends laughed and joked. He used to have friends back in middle school. But high school changed things. When you're failing everything and can't participate in after-school activities because you're stuck in mandatory study halls, you tend to lose touch with people. "Hey, is anyone sitting here?" Daniel looked up to find Ben from his biology class hovering with his lunch tray. They weren't friends exactly, but Ben had always been decent to him. "No, go ahead," Daniel said. Ben sat down and started eating. "Rough day?" "Just the usual," Daniel muttered. "Yeah, I hear you. Mr. Thompson's exam was brutal. I barely passed." Daniel didn't mention that Ben's barely passing was probably still 20 points higher than his score. That was the thing about school. Everyone complained about hard tests, but when you were actually failing, truly failing, it was a different universe. After school, Daniel walked home instead of taking the bus. The extra time helped him clear his head and delay the inevitable conversation with his parents. His mom would ask how his day was, and he'd have to tell her about the failed exam and the teacher conference. She'd try to hide her disappointment, but he'd see it anyway. The house was quiet when he got home. His mom wasn't back from her shift at the hospital yet, and his dad wouldn't be home until late. Daniel dropped his backpack and headed to his room. The walls were covered with notes and formulas he'd written out, trying to memorize them. None of it helped during tests. He pulled out his homework and stared at the questions. Chemistry problems that might as well have been written in another language. He started working through them anyway because what else could he do? Give up? His parents hadn't given up when they moved here with nothing. He owed them more than that. Hours passed. The light outside faded. Daniel's head pounded from concentration, but he pushed through. Problem after problem, most of which he probably got wrong. But he tried. He always tried. His mom's voice drifted up from downstairs. "Daniel, dinner's ready." He headed down, steeling himself for the conversation. She'd set the table. Just the two of them, since his dad was working late again. They ate in silence for a few minutes before she finally asked, "How was school?" Daniel put down his fork. "Failed another chem test. Teacher wants to set up a meeting." His mom's face crumpled for just a second before she smoothed it out. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "You're smart, Daniel. You're kind and you work hard. The grades will come." But they both knew that was just something parents say. The grades hadn't come. They never came, no matter how hard he worked. And sitting there in that quiet kitchen, Daniel felt like he was drowning and nobody could throw him a rope that would actually reach. He didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. Not because of a test or a tutor or some miracle cure for his failing grades, but because sometimes life has a funny way of showing you that the things you're good at aren't always the things that show up on a report card. Sometimes what really matters only becomes clear when everything else falls away, and you're left with just yourself and a choice about what kind of person you're going to be. But that was still to come. For now, Daniel was just a kid who failed every exam, trying his best in a system that seemed designed for everyone but him. The permission slip had been sitting on the kitchen counter for a week. Daniel kept forgetting to get his mom to sign it, which was probably his brain's way of trying to avoid the whole thing. A biology field trip to Pine Ridge Nature Reserve. Great. Another opportunity to feel lost while everyone else understood the assignment. But Ms. Rodriguez had cornered him after class yesterday, asking about the slip with that concerned teacher look. So here he was Thursday morning climbing onto the yellow school bus with a backpack full of supplies he probably wouldn't use correctly. "Back of the bus," someone yelled, and Daniel automatically headed that way. The unspoken rule of high school. Popular kids in the back, everyone else scattered in the middle, and the really unfortunate ones stuck near the teachers up front. Daniel usually sat somewhere in the middle, in that invisible zone where nobody really noticed you. The bus lurched forward, and he pressed his forehead against the cool window. The city slowly gave way to suburbs, then to stretches of trees and open land. At least it was a nice day. Bright October sunshine, the kind that made everything look like it belonged on a postcard. "All right, listen up." Ms. Rodriguez stood at the front of the bus, gripping the seat to steady herself. "When we get there, you'll be splitting into groups of 4. Each group will collect samples from different sections of the reserve. We're looking at ecosystem diversity, so pay attention to plants, insects, soil composition, everything we've been studying." Daniel tuned out the rest. He'd end up in whatever group needed an extra person, probably doing the grunt work while everyone else took notes and understood what was actually happening. That was fine. He'd gotten used to being the weak link. Pine Ridge Reserve was bigger than he expected. The parking lot opened onto a visitor center with trails branching off in different directions. Ms. Rodriguez divided them into groups, checking names off on her clipboard. Daniel ended up with Ben, a girl named Lily who was really into environmental science, and Kevin, who spent most of his time on his phone. Okay. We've got the North Trail, Lily announced, looking at their assignment sheet. We need soil samples, plant identification, and documentation of any wildlife activity. They headed out, Lily leading the way with her notebook already open. Ben carried the sample collection kit. Kevin scrolled through his phone. Daniel just walked, carrying the extra water bottles because someone had to. The trail was actually pretty nice. Quiet except for bird calls and the crunch of leaves under their feet. The forest smelled like earth and pine, and for a minute Daniel let himself relax. At least out here, nobody was testing him on anything. Nobody was disappointed in him. Look at this fungus, Ben said, crouching by a fallen log. Is this the kind we're supposed to document? Lily leaned in to examine it. Yeah, definitely. Let me get a photo. Daniel stood back watching them work. They were good at this. They knew what they were looking for, what mattered. He'd probably walked past 10 important things already without noticing. Daniel, can you hand me a sample bag? Lily asked. He dug through the kit and found one, passing it over. At least he could do that right. They moved along the trail, stopping every few minutes to collect or photograph something. Kevin had actually put his phone away and was helping now, which was surprising. Even Daniel started to enjoy it a little. There was something calming about being in the woods, away from the pressure of classrooms and tests. About a mile in, the trail split. One path continued through the forest. The other branched toward a rocky overlook that jutted out above a small canyon. According to the map, the overlook had a great view and was a good spot to observe the reserve's layout. Should we check out the view? Ben suggested. We could take photos for the visual documentation part. Sure, but make it quick, Lily said. We still need to cover more ground. They took the path toward the overlook, which got steeper and rockier as they climbed. Daniel could hear other groups in the distance scattered throughout the reserve. The whole class was out here somewhere, all working on the same assignment. The overlook was worth the climb. You could see for miles, the forest spreading out in every direction like a green ocean. The rocks formed a natural platform with a wooden safety fence running along the edge. A few students from another group were already there taking pictures. Daniel recognized Katie, a girl from his English class. She was leaning over the fence with her camera trying to get a shot of something below. There's a hawk's nest down there, she called to her group. Can you see it? Her friends crowded around, everyone pointing and trying to spot it. Katie leaned further, balancing on the lower rail of the fence to get a better angle. Be careful, one of her friends said, but they were laughing. Not really worried. Daniel watched from back near the trail entrance, that nervous feeling settling in his stomach. The fence looked old. The wood was weathered and worn, and Katie was leaning pretty far over it. I almost got it, Katie said, stretching her arm out. Then everything happened so fast it felt like slow motion at the same time. The crack was loud enough that everyone heard it. The wooden rail Katie was standing on split right down the middle. She grabbed for the top of the fence, but her momentum was already carrying her forward. Her scream cut through the air as she fell. For a second, everyone froze. Just stood there, unable to process what they'd just seen. Katie had disappeared over the edge. The sound of her body hitting the rocks below made Daniel's blood run cold. Oh my God, someone whispered. Then everyone started moving at once. Students rushed to the edge looking down. Katie's friends were screaming her name. Someone was crying. The whole scene dissolved into chaos. Daniel ran to the edge with everyone else. Katie was lying on the rocks about 15 feet below, not moving. Her leg was bent at a wrong angle. Blood was spreading across the rocks from somewhere under her head. She wasn't responding to anyone calling her name. Ms. Rodriguez pushed through the crowd, her face white. Everyone step back. Nobody else goes near that fence. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. We need an ambulance now. But Daniel was barely listening. He was staring at Katie, at the blood, at how still she was. Something in his brain clicked into gear like a switch flipping. He didn't think. He just moved. I'm going down there, he said. What? No. Daniel, wait for the paramedics, Ms. Rodriguez said. But he was already climbing over the safer part of the fence, finding footholds in the rocky slope. Daniel, stop, Ben yelled, but he didn't stop. The climb down was terrifying. The rocks were loose and sharp. He slipped twice, scraping his hands raw. But he kept going because Katie was down there and she was bleeding and nobody else was doing anything but standing around screaming and calling 911. When he reached her, his hands were shaking. She was face down, one arm twisted underneath her. The blood was coming from her head, pooling on the rocks. So much blood. Way too much blood. Katie? His voice came out wrong, too high. Too scared, she didn't respond. Daniel's mind raced. Don't move her. That was important. He knew that much. Moving someone with a head or neck injury could make it worse. But she was bleeding. Bleeding really badly. And he couldn't see her face to know if she was breathing. Is she okay? Someone screamed from above. I don't know. Daniel yelled back. His heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. Think. He'd seen this before. Not in real life, but somewhere. His grandmother. 2 years ago, she'd collapsed at their house. Hit her head on the corner of the coffee table. There'd been so much blood then, too. The paramedics had come and they'd done things. Specific things. What were they? Check breathing. That was first. Daniel carefully positioned himself where he could see Katie's face without moving her body. He put his cheek close to her mouth and nose, trying to feel for breath. For a horrible second, he felt nothing. Then faintly, he felt it, warm air against his skin. She was breathing. She's breathing. He shouted up to Ms. Rodriguez. But the blood. God, the blood wasn't stopping. It was spreading across the rocks, bright red and terrifying. Head wounds bled a lot. He remembered someone saying that once, maybe in health class, or maybe during that thing with his grandmother. Head wounds bled a lot even when they weren't always as bad as they looked. But this looked really bad. Daniel yanked off his jacket without thinking. He balled it up and pressed it gently against the source of the bleeding on Katie's head. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely keep pressure steady. Ambulance is coming, Ms. Rodriguez called down. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That was forever. That was too long. Katie's face was so pale. Daniel kept pressure on the wound, his jacket already soaking through with blood. His biology textbook had a section on first aid. He'd skimmed it, failed the quiz on it, but some of it must have stuck because he found himself remembering things. Keep pressure on bleeding wounds. Don't move victims with potential spinal injuries. Monitor breathing. Talk to her, he muttered to himself. Where had he heard that? Somewhere. Keep talking to unconscious people. It might help. Hey, Katie, you're going to be okay. Help is coming. Just hang on. His knees hurt from kneeling on the rocks. His arms were starting to shake from holding pressure. But he didn't let go. Above him, he could hear Ms. Rodriguez trying to keep the other students calm. Someone was still crying. Ben kept calling down, asking if there was anything he could do. Just tell them to hurry, Daniel yelled back. The minutes crawled by. Daniel kept talking to Katie even though she didn't respond. He kept the pressure on her head even though his arms felt like they were going to fall off, and he watched her breathing, counting each breath to make sure she was still alive. Somewhere in the distance, sirens started wailing. The sirens got louder, and Daniel's arms felt like they were on fire. He'd been holding pressure on Katie's head wound for what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 minutes. His jacket was completely soaked through with blood now, warm and heavy against his hands. They're here, someone shouted from above. Daniel could hear boots crunching through the forest, voices calling out. He didn't dare look up or move. He just kept the pressure steady and kept talking to Katie. Help's here now. You're going to be fine. Just keep breathing. 2 paramedics appeared at the edge of the overlook looking down at the situation. One of them, a tall guy with a shaved head, immediately started rappelling down with a rope. The other, a woman with her hair pulled back, talked into her radio. We've got a teenage female. Fall from approximately 15 feet. Head trauma with significant bleeding. Patient unresponsive, she called up to someone. The first paramedic reached the bottom and moved quickly to Katie's side. Daniel expected him to push him out of the way, but instead the guy looked at him. Really looked at him. You've been holding pressure this whole time, he asked. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. Good. That's real good, kid. I'm going to take over now, but you did exactly right. Don't let go until I'm ready, okay? Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. He'd done it right. He hadn't messed up. The paramedic positioned his hands next to Daniel's. On 3. 1, 2, 3, they switched, and Daniel pulled his hands away. They were covered in blood, shaking uncontrollably. He stumbled backward, his legs suddenly weak. Hey, easy, the second paramedic said. She'd made it down and was now checking Katie's vitals. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Daniel managed. "Is she going to be okay?" The paramedics didn't answer. They were working fast, all business. Checking her pulse, examining the wound, carefully stabilizing her neck. The woman pulled out a blood pressure cuff while the man shone a light in Katie's eyes. "Pupils unequal and sluggish," he said. "BP's dropping. We need to move her fast." More emergency workers arrived at the top of the overlook. Someone lowered down a backboard and medical supplies. Daniel pressed himself against the rocks, trying to stay out of the way but unable to look away. "Kid, what's your name?" the male paramedic asked while working. Daniel, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Everything you saw." Daniel's mind felt fuzzy, but he forced himself to focus. She was leaning over the fence taking pictures. "The rail broke. She fell and landed on these rocks. She wasn't moving when I got down here. There was so much blood. I checked if she was breathing and she was, so I just pressed my jacket against where the bleeding was. I didn't move her because I thought that might hurt her more." The paramedic glanced at him while securing Katie to the backboard. "How'd you know to do all that?" "I don't know. My grandmother had an accident once. I watched what the paramedics did, and we learned some of it in health class, I think." "You think?" The woman smiled at him, but it was tight with stress. "You did better than most adults would have done. See this?" She pointed at the blood-soaked jacket still pressed against Katie's head. "You found the source of the bleed and you maintained pressure. That's critical. Head wounds from arteries can cause someone to bleed out in minutes. You might have saved her life." The words didn't really register. Daniel felt numb, like he was watching everything happen to someone else. They got Katie secured and started the careful process of lifting her up. More emergency workers had arrived, setting up a pulley system. Daniel climbed up the slope on his own. His hands and knees scraped raw, not really feeling any of it. At the top, chaos had organized into controlled urgency. Ms. Rodriguez was on the phone with someone, probably the school. The students had been moved back from the edge. Ben grabbed Daniel's arm as soon as he cleared the fence. "Dude, are you okay? That was insane. You just climbed down there." Daniel looked at his hands, still covered in blood. Katie's blood. His stomach rolled. "I need to wash my hands." "There's a first aid station at the visitor center," one of the emergency workers said. "You should get checked out too. Make sure you're not injured." "I'm fine." "You're not fine," Ms. Rodriguez said, her voice sharp with worry and maybe something else. "You're in shock. Go with them." Daniel let himself be led down the trail, Ben walking beside him. Behind them, he could hear the paramedics loading Katie onto a stretcher. The sirens started up again as they rushed her to the ambulance. At the visitor center, a nurse cleaned his hands and checked him over. Scraped palms, bruised knees, nothing serious. She kept asking if he felt dizzy or nauseous. He said no, but honestly, he wasn't sure what he felt. Empty, maybe. Or too full. Like his brain couldn't process everything that had just happened. His phone buzzed. His mom. Ms. Rodriguez must have called the parents already. "Daniel, are you okay? Your teacher said there was an accident." "I'm fine, Mom. Someone else got hurt. I helped, that's all." "What do you mean you helped?" "Daniel, what happened?" He didn't have the energy to explain. "I'll tell you when I get home. I'm okay, I promise." The school sent another bus to collect everyone early. The field trip was obviously over. Students clustered in small groups talking in hushed, excited voices. Daniel caught fragments of conversations as he walked past. "Did you see him just climb down there? I would have been too scared to move." "He was down there for like 20 minutes, just holding pressure on her head. I heard she might die if he hadn't done that." Daniel got on the bus and went straight to the back, slumping in a seat by the window. He didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to think about it. But his brain kept replaying it anyway. Katie's scream. The crack of the wood. The blood spreading across the rocks. Her pale, still face. Ben sat down next to him but had the sense not to say anything. They rode back to school in silence. The principal was waiting when they arrived. Mr. Harrison, a stern-looking man who Daniel had only ever seen during assemblies. He pulled Daniel aside before anyone else could get off the bus. "Daniel, I need you to come to my office. Your parents are on their way. Great." Daniel followed him through the empty hallways. His parents were going to freak out. His mom would cry. His dad would ask a million questions. And he still had blood under his fingernails that the nurse hadn't been able to get out. In the office, Mr. Harrison gestured to a chair. "Sit, can I get you anything? Water?" "I'm okay." Your teacher told me what happened. What you did. The principal leaned against his desk, studying him. That was incredibly brave. And incredibly stupid. You know that, right? Daniel didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. The paramedics called from the hospital, Mr. Harrison continued. They wanted to make sure we knew that your actions likely saved that girl's life. She was bleeding from a severed artery. Without immediate pressure, she would have died before they got there. The words hit Daniel like a physical thing. Saved her life. He'd saved Katie's life. They also said you did everything right. Didn't move her. Checked her breathing. Maintained pressure on the wound. Stayed calm. Where'd you learn all that? I don't really know, Daniel said honestly. I just did what felt right. What I remembered from when my grandmother got hurt. From health class, maybe. Mr. Harrison shook his head slowly. You failed health class. I know. You're failing most of your classes. I know, Daniel repeated. Quieter this time. So how is it that you couldn't pass a test on first aid, but when it actually mattered, you knew exactly what to do? Daniel had been asking himself the same question. Tests are different. There's all this pressure and the words get jumbled and I second-guess everything. But down there, it wasn't about remembering the right answer for a test. Someone needed help. I just did what needed to be done. The principal was quiet for a long moment. That's interesting. Before Daniel could ask what he meant, the office door burst open. His mom rushed in, his dad right behind her. She grabbed him, checking him over like he was 5 years old again. Are you hurt? Show me your hands. Daniel, what were you thinking? I'm okay, Mom. His dad stood back, his expression unreadable. The school said you saved someone's life. I just helped until the paramedics got there. They said if you hadn't acted, she would have died, his dad pressed. Daniel shrugged, uncomfortable with everyone staring at him. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Mr. Harrison said firmly. They wouldn't have. Everyone else froze. You acted. That matters. His mom was crying now, hugging him tight. His dad had that look on his face, the one Daniel couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe? It was unfamiliar enough that Daniel wasn't sure. They let him go home early. In the car, his parents were unusually quiet. When they finally got home, Daniel went straight to his room, stripped off his blood-stained clothes, and stood in the shower until the water ran cold. Later, lying in bed, he checked his phone. Text messages from people he barely knew. Ben asking if he was okay. Someone he didn't recognize saying he was a hero. The word felt wrong. Heroes passed tests. Heroes had good grades and bright futures. Heroes weren't kids who failed everything and disappointed their parents. But maybe just for today he'd done something right. Something that actually mattered. Test scores or no test scores. His phone buzzed with one more text. From Ms. Rodriguez. Katie's in surgery but stable. The doctor said you gave her a fighting chance. I'm sorry I doubted you, Daniel. Thank you. Daniel stared at the message until his vision blurred. Then he put the phone down and closed his eyes. Too exhausted to cry, too overwhelmed to think. Tomorrow he'd still be failing chemistry. He'd still be the kid who couldn't pass a test. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe he wasn't completely useless after all. Daniel woke up Friday morning to 73 text messages. His phone had been buzzing on and off all night, but he'd been too exhausted to check it. Now, lying in bed with morning light streaming through his window, he scrolled through them in disbelief. Most were from people he barely knew. Classmates he'd never spoken to saying things like, "Dude, you're a hero," and "That was amazing." A few were asking if he was okay. Several were asking what happened, like he wanted to relive it. One message stood out, though. From Katie's best friend, Amanda. Katie's out of surgery. She's going to be okay because of you. Her family wants to meet you. Thank you for saving her life. Daniel read it 3 times. She was okay. Katie was going to be okay. The weight that had been sitting on his chest since yesterday lifted a little. His mom knocked softly on his door. You awake, sweetie? Yeah. She came in carrying a cup of tea, her eyes red like she'd been crying.
How are you feeling?
Tired. You don't have to go to school today if you don't want to. I can call you in sick, the offer was tempting. Hide at home, avoid the questions, pretend yesterday never happened. But Daniel shook his head. I should go. His mom sat on the edge of his bed. Your father and I are so proud of you. What you did, Daniel, you saved that girl's life. The paramedics saved her life. I just helped. Don't do that. Don't minimize it. She touched his hand gently. You've been so hard on yourself about school, about your grades. But yesterday you showed everyone what really matters. You showed them who you really are. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He took the tea and sipped it, grateful for something to do with his hands. Also, his mom added, there's a reporter who wants to talk to you, from the local news. I told them you needed time, but they're very persistent. A reporter? Why would they want to talk to me? She gave him a look that said he was being deliberately dense. Because you're a hero, Daniel. This is news. Hero. There was that word again. It still felt wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. At school, everything was different and weird. People stared as he walked down the hallway. Some nodded at him. A few actually said hi, including kids who'd never acknowledged his existence before. Kevin from yesterday's field trip slapped him on the back hard enough to hurt. Dude, you're all anyone's talking about. Did you really climb down to her without any rope or anything? It wasn't that far, Daniel mumbled, trying to get to his locker. Are you kidding? It was like a cliff. I would have passed out. You've got some serious guts, man. Daniel finally got his locker open and shoved his stuff inside, hoping Kevin would take the hint and leave. He didn't. So is it true Katie was like dying, and you stopped the bleeding with your bare hands? I used my jacket. Still, that's so cool. You're like a real-life superhero or something. Daniel shut his locker harder than necessary. I'm really not. First period was chemistry with Mr. Thompson. Daniel slid into his usual back corner seat, hoping to disappear. Fat chance of that happening today. Mr. Thompson was writing on the board when Daniel came in, but he paused and looked over. Daniel, good to see you. How are you holding up? Fine, sir. The teacher nodded slowly. What you did yesterday was remarkable. I wanted you to know that. Daniel felt his face get hot. Other students were filtering in now, all of them looking at him. He wanted to sink through the floor. Class started, and for about 10 minutes things felt normal. Mr. Thompson went over the homework, explained a new concept about chemical bonds. Daniel took notes, understanding maybe half of it, same as always. Then there was a knock on the door. The principal, Mr. Harrison, stuck his head in. Sorry to interrupt. Daniel, can you come with me for a moment? Every head in the room swiveled to look at him. Daniel gathered his stuff and followed Mr. Harrison into the hallway, his stomach churning. What now? There are some people here who'd like to meet you, Mr. Harrison said as they walked. Katie's parents. Daniel's stomach dropped even further. Now, but shouldn't I look? You're fine. Come on. They went to the principal's office. Inside were 3 people Daniel had never seen before. A man in his 40s with tired eyes and rumpled clothes. A woman around the same age who'd clearly been crying. And a girl about 8 or 9 holding the woman's hand tightly. Katie's family. The mom moved first. She crossed the room and pulled Daniel into a hug so tight he could barely breathe. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you so much. Daniel stood frozen, unsure what to do. Over her shoulder, he could see Katie's dad watching him with an intensity that was almost scary. When the mom finally let go, the dad stepped forward and shook Daniel's hand firmly. I'm Robert. This is my wife Jennifer and our daughter Mia. We wanted to meet the young man who saved Katie's life. I just did what anyone would do, Daniel said automatically. No. Robert's voice was firm. The school told us what happened. Everyone else panicked. You acted. The doctor said if you hadn't maintained pressure on that wound, our daughter would have bled to death before the ambulance arrived. Do you understand what that means? Daniel nodded, throat tight. Our daughter is alive because of you, Jennifer said, her eyes welling up again. She's still in the hospital, but she's going to recover. She's going to live. Because you were brave enough and smart enough to do what needed to be done. The little sister Mia was staring at him with wide eyes. Are you really a hero? She asked. Daniel crouched down to her level. I'm just a kid who helped your sister. That's all. Katie says you're her guardian angel, Mia said seriously. That hit harder than it should have. Daniel had to look away, blinking fast. When Katie's strong enough for visitors, we'd love for you to come see her, Robert said. She wants to thank you herself. I'd like that, Daniel managed. They talked for a few more minutes. Jennifer hugged him again before they left. Mr. Harrison walked them out, leaving Daniel alone in the office for a moment. He sat down heavily in one of the chairs, feeling drained. When Mr. Harrison came back, he was holding something. A newspaper. Have you seen this? He handed it to Daniel. Right there on the front page of the local section was a headline, "Student Hero Saves Classmate's Life." Below it was a photo someone must have taken at the scene. You could see the ambulance and emergency workers, and if you looked carefully, Daniel in the background, his hands covered in blood. "How did they get this?" Daniel asked. "Someone always has a phone," Mr. Harrison said. "The story's already been picked up by a couple news stations. You're going to be getting a lot of attention for a while." "I don't want attention. I just want things to go back to normal." The principal sat down across from him. "Daniel, I want to talk to you about something. About school." Here it comes, Daniel thought. Now they'll tell me I'm too far behind, that I should drop down to easier classes, that I'm not cut out for the regular track. "Your teachers have been talking," Mr. Harrison continued, "about your performance, and about what happened yesterday. I'm trying, I really am. I know my grades are terrible, but I study all the time and it just doesn't stick, and—" "Daniel." The principal held up a hand. "I'm not here to criticize you. The opposite, actually. We want to help you figure out why there's such a disconnect between what you clearly know and what shows up on your tests." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" "You failed your health class exam on first aid. Got a 42%. Your teacher said you couldn't identify basic procedures, couldn't explain the steps, couldn't answer scenario questions. But yesterday, in a real emergency, you did everything right. You assessed the situation. You didn't move her when you shouldn't. You found the source of bleeding. You maintained pressure. You monitored her breathing. These are things trained first responders do. So how do you explain that?" "I don't know. Tests are just—" "They're different, exactly. And we think we should figure out why." Mr. Harrison pulled out a folder. "With your parents' permission, we'd like to have you evaluated by an educational psychologist. See if there's something we're missing. Sometimes very smart kids struggle in traditional testing environments for reasons that have nothing to do with their actual intelligence or ability." Daniel stared at him. "You think I'm smart? I think you're capable of incredible things. Yesterday proved that. But something about our system isn't working for you, and I think we owe it to you to figure out what that is." For the first time in months, something that felt almost like hope flickered in Daniel's chest. "Okay," he said quietly. "Yeah, I'd like that." "Good, now there's one more thing." Mr. Harrison's expression shifted, becoming more formal. "The school board is meeting next week. They want to recognize what you did. There's talk of giving you an award at the next assembly, the Humanitarian Achievement Award. It's something we've never done before, but the board feels your actions deserve recognition." "An award? For me?" The idea felt surreal. "Yes, for you. For being brave enough to act when others couldn't. For having the presence of mind to do the right things under pressure. For saving a life." Daniel left the principal's office feeling like he was walking through a dream. The rest of the day was a blur. Teachers smiled at him. Students said congratulations. Someone started a round of applause when he walked into the cafeteria, and he wanted to die from embarrassment. At lunch, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, Daniel. This is Katie. They're letting me text finally. Thank you doesn't seem like enough for what you did. You saved my life. I owe you everything." "Really? Thank you." Daniel read it over and over. Katie was texting him. Katie was alive and okay and texting him. He typed back, "Just glad you're okay. Get better soon." When he got home that afternoon, there was a news van parked outside his house. His mom met him at the door looking frazzled. "They've been here for an hour. I told them you'd probably talk to them, but only for a few minutes. You don't have to if you don't want to." Daniel thought about saying no, but maybe if he talked to them once, they'd leave him alone. "Okay, I'll do it." The interview lasted 15 minutes. The reporter asked about what happened, how he felt, what made him act. Daniel answered as honestly as he could, though it felt weird talking about himself like he was someone special. When they asked if he felt like a hero, he said no. When they asked what he wanted people to know, he said that anyone could do what he did if they paid attention and didn't panic. That night, his family watched the news together. And there he was on TV looking uncomfortable and young and nothing like a hero. But the reporter called him one anyway. Called him brave and selfless and an inspiration. His dad put a hand on his shoulder. Just rested it there, solid and warm. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. For the first time in years, Daniel looked at his father and didn't see disappointment. 3 weeks after the accident, Daniel sat in a small office at the district's educational center, tapping his pencil nervously against his knee. Dr. Chen, the educational psychologist, smiled at him from across the desk. "You can relax. This isn't a test. There's no passing or failing here," easy for her to say. Daniel had spent the last 2 weeks doing various assessments, answering questions, doing puzzles and memory tasks. It felt like testing even if she said it wasn't. "We've completed your evaluation," Dr. Chen said, opening a thick folder, "and I think we've figured out why school has been so difficult for you." Daniel leaned forward. His parents sat on either side of him, his mom gripping his hand tightly. "You have dyslexia, Daniel. A pretty significant case, actually. You also have something called auditory processing disorder, which affects how your brain handles spoken information, and there are some attention challenges that suggest ADHD." The words hung in the air. Daniel had heard of dyslexia before, but he'd always thought that just meant mixing up letters. "What does that mean? Like, for real?" "It means your brain is wired differently. Not wrong, just different. When you read, your brain has to work much harder than most people's brains to decode the words. When teachers lecture, your brain struggles to process and store that information. And when you take tests, especially timed ones, all of this gets worse because of the pressure. So I'm not just stupid?" "No," Dr. Chen's voice was firm. "You're absolutely not stupid. In fact, your IQ test came back very high. You're smart, Daniel. Extremely smart. Your brain just learns differently than the way traditional schools teach." His mom made a small sound next to him. When Daniel looked over, she was crying. "Why didn't anyone catch this before?" his dad asked, his voice tight. "It happens more often than you'd think," Dr. Chen said. "Especially with bright kids like Daniel. They develop coping mechanisms. They work twice as hard as everyone else to get half the results. Teachers see a kid who seems unmotivated or lazy, not realizing the kid is putting in more effort than anyone else in the class." Daniel felt something crack open inside his chest. All those hours studying, all those failed tests. It wasn't that he wasn't trying hard enough. It wasn't that he was dumb. His brain just worked differently. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now we get you help. The school will provide accommodations, extra time on tests, audio versions of textbooks, note-taking assistance. There are lots of strategies we can use. It won't make the learning disabilities go away, but it will give you the tools to work with your brain instead of against it." Walking out of that office, Daniel felt lighter than he had in years, like someone had finally given him permission to stop beating himself up for something that wasn't his fault. At school the next day, he had a meeting with all his teachers and the school counselor to discuss his accommodations. Mr. Thompson, his chemistry teacher, looked almost embarrassed. "I wish we'd caught this sooner," he said. "Looking back at your work, the signs were there. I should have seen it." "It's okay," Daniel said. And weirdly, he meant it. But the real change came that Friday afternoon. The whole school was called to an assembly. Daniel had been told he needed to attend, but he figured it was just another boring school spirit thing. He sat with Ben in the middle of the auditorium watching students file in. "Do you know what this is about?" Ben asked. "No idea." The lights dimmed. Mr. Harrison walked onto the stage and the auditorium slowly quieted down. "Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're here to celebrate something special. Something that reminds us what this school and education in general should really be about." Daniel shifted in his seat. These assemblies always dragged on forever. 3 weeks ago, something terrible happened during a field trip. One of our students was seriously injured. But something amazing happened too. Another student acted with courage and skill that saved a life. Oh no. Daniel's stomach dropped. This was about him. This assembly was about him. "Daniel, could you come up here, please?" Every head in the auditorium turned to look at him. Daniel felt his face go red. Ben nudged him, grinning. "Dude, go!" Walking down the aisle felt like it took a million years. Every step people were staring, whispering, some were even applauding. By the time he reached the stage, his legs felt like jelly. Mr. Harrison put a hand on his shoulder. This young man did something extraordinary. When Katie fell and was bleeding from a serious head injury, everyone else froze. But Daniel climbed down to help her. He checked her breathing. He applied pressure to stop the bleeding. He stayed calm and did everything right. The paramedics told us that without his actions, Katie would not have survived. The auditorium was completely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. But Daniel's story is about more than just one moment of courage. You see, Daniel has been struggling in school, failing classes, falling behind. Some teachers, and I'll be honest, some students too, thought he just wasn't trying hard enough. Daniel wanted to disappear. Why was he talking about this? But we were wrong. Daniel was trying harder than any of us knew. He has learning disabilities that were just recently diagnosed. Disabilities that made traditional schooling incredibly difficult. Yet he kept trying. He never gave up. And when it mattered most, when someone's life hung in the balance, Daniel showed us what he's really made of. Mr. Harrison turned to face Daniel directly. The school board has created a new award, the Humanitarian Excellence Award, and you are the first recipient. This award recognizes not just academic achievement, but character, courage, the kind of person who steps up when others step back. He held out a plaque. Daniel took it with shaking hands. His name was engraved on it, along with the date and a description of what he'd done. But we have one more surprise, Mr. Harrison said. Katie and her family are here today. The side door of the auditorium opened. Katie came in, moving slowly with her parents supporting her on either side. She still had bandages on her head and she walked carefully, but she was smiling. The whole auditorium erupted in applause. Katie made her way onto the stage. When she reached Daniel, she hugged him tight. Thank you, she said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. You gave me my life back. Daniel couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. He just hugged her back, relieved beyond words that she was okay. Katie's mom stepped up to the microphone. Our family wants to thank Daniel, but we also want to thank this school for recognizing that there are different kinds of intelligence, different ways to be excellent. Daniel might have struggled with tests, but when it counted, he knew exactly what to do. That's the kind of person we should all aspire to be. The applause was deafening. Students were on their feet. Teachers were clapping. Some people were crying. Daniel stood there holding his plaque, Katie beside him, and for the first time in his life he felt like he belonged. After the assembly, there was a reception. More people than Daniel could count came up to congratulate him. His parents were there, both of them crying happy tears. His dad shook his hand like he was a grown man, not a kid who failed chemistry. I'm sorry, his dad said quietly. I pushed you so hard. I thought you just needed to try harder. I didn't understand. It's okay, Dad. No, it's not. But I'm going to do better. We both are. He glanced at Daniel's mom, who nodded. We're proud of you, not just for what you did for Katie, but for not giving up even when everything felt impossible. 2 months later, things had settled into a new normal. Daniel's accommodations were in place. He got audio versions of his textbooks, which helped a lot. He got extra time on tests, and he could take them in a quiet room where he didn't feel rushed. His grades were improving slowly but steadily, but more than that, something else had changed. Daniel had started volunteering at the local firehouse. One of the paramedics from Katie's accident had suggested it, said they could always use volunteers. Daniel figured, why not? He'd saved one life by accident. Maybe he could learn to do it on purpose. He was good at it. The training came naturally in a way school never had. When they practiced CPR or wound treatment or emergency protocols, his hands knew what to do. His brain remembered. It made sense in a way that chemistry formulas never would.